Lena Everett slammed the car door a little too hard, only to realize the second it clicked shut that her keys were still on the front seat. No, 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 are you kidding me? She groaned, pressing her forehead to the window of her ancient silver Corolla. The keys dangled mockingly from the ignition. Her tote bag sat on the passenger seat, and her phone was inside it. Of course. It was already past 8. The parking lot behind the bakery was empty, and the temperature had started to drop. She'd stayed late for an inventory count and had turned off her phone to avoid distractions. Now she was locked out, alone and cold with no one around to help. Well, almost no one. A sleek black SUV she didn't recognize idled near the far end of the lot. Its windows were tinted and the engine purred too smoothly to be anything less than luxury. A man stepped out of the driver's side. Tall, broad shoulders, rolled-up sleeves revealing strong forearms. He had dark hair slightly tousled, and he wore jeans and a black Henley like he'd just walked off the set of some rugged outdoor commercial. He looked around, eyes landing on her. "You okay over there?" he called, walking toward her. Lena hesitated. She wasn't the type to accept help from strangers easily, but with no phone and no way to get into her car, she didn't have much of a choice. "I locked my keys in," she said, giving a sheepish shrug. "They're right there, just out of reach." He stopped a few feet away, giving her space. "Want me to help?" "You know how to break into a car?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. He grinned. "Not exactly, but I've got tools in the back. I might be able to pop the lock without doing any damage." Desperation won out over caution. "If you can do that without setting off the alarm or breaking anything, you'll be my hero." "Challenge accepted," he said, heading back to his SUV. Lena watched as he opened the trunk, pulling out a slim black case. Everything about him screamed understated wealth: his car, the watch on his wrist, the way he moved like he didn't have to hurry for anyone. But he didn't act like he was better than her. In fact, he looked like he was enjoying himself. She leaned against the car as he returned, carefully slipping a small tool between the window and the rubber lining. He worked silently, focused, until there was a soft click. The door unlocked. Lena stared at him. "Seriously?" He looked pleased. "You're in." She opened the door and grabbed her bag, clutching it to her chest. "I don't even know what to say." "Thank you." "You can start by telling me your name," he said, smiling. "I'm Atlas. Atlas Foster." "Lena. Lena Everett." "Nice to meet you, Lena Everett." "Do you lock yourself out of cars often? Or was this a one-time thing?" "I mean, I like to think I'm not a complete disaster, but today's not making a strong case." He laughed, but it was warm, not mocking. "Everyone has days like that." Lena tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Well, thanks again. Seriously. You saved me. Glad I could help. Want to grab a coffee sometime and celebrate your car's freedom?" She blinked. "You're asking me out?" Atlas shrugged casually. "Why not? I like rescuing damsels in distress." She rolled her eyes but smiled. "I'm not exactly a damsel." "I noticed," he said, voice low, "but I still want to know more about you." Lena hesitated. He was charming, too charming. But something about him felt genuine, and she hadn't been asked out in months. "Okay, sure. Coffee. Tomorrow." "Tomorrow," she agreed. He gave her a small wave and walked back to his SUV. She watched him drive away, heart beating faster than it should have. The next afternoon, he was already sitting at a cafe table when she arrived. He stood when he saw her and pulled out her chair before sitting back down. "So," Lena said, sipping her latte, "do you help random women in parking lots often?" "Only the ones who catch my eye," he said without missing a beat. She laughed. "You're smooth." "I'm honest." They talked for over an hour. He asked about her job at the bakery, her dreams of starting her own cake business, her life in this small city. He didn't say much about himself, only that he worked in investments and liked to travel. She didn't think much of it. Some people weren't big on sharing. They started seeing each other. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinners turned into late-night walks and long conversations. Atlas seemed to genuinely enjoy her company. He asked questions, remembered details, and never once looked at his phone when he was with her. Still, something about him didn't add up. He always paid in cash. He wore no flashy brands, but everything he owned was expensive. His SUV had no dealership stickers. When she asked where he lived, he said a place downtown and changed the subject. One night, after a late dinner at a cozy Italian place, he walked her to her door and lingered. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small box from his coat pocket. Lena opened it and gasped. Inside was a pair of earrings, delicate gold hoops with tiny diamonds. Elegant and subtle, but still far too much. "Atlas, I can't accept these." "Why not?" They're too expensive. I can't wear diamonds from a guy I've only known a few weeks." His eyes met hers. "You can wear them because I saw them and thought of you. But why are you doing all this?" His voice softened. "Because I like you, Lena. A lot." She stared at him, heart racing. "You don't even really know me. I know you say what you think. You work hard. You're kind, but don't let people walk all over you. I know you love cinnamon, hate traffic, and dream bigger than your budget allows." Her throat tightened. "You've been paying attention." He stepped closer. "I haven't been able to stop." She didn't know what to say, so she kissed him. Right there on her porch under the soft glow of the porch light. And he kissed her back like he meant it, with one hand on her waist, the other curling gently around her neck. But 2 weeks later, everything almost fell apart. She was at a farmer's market when she saw him across the street, stepping out of a sleek black town car, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her rent. A man in a Bluetooth headset followed him, rattling off numbers and stocks. A driver held the car door open. Lena froze. Atlas didn't see her. He walked into a tall glass building with a gold plaque that read, "Foster Capital Group." Foster. Atlas Foster. Investment firm. Millionaire. Lena's stomach dropped. He hadn't just helped her in a parking lot. He was rich. Really rich. And he never told her. Lena paced her apartment like a caged animal, the heels of her boots clicking against the worn hardwood. She still had the earrings in their velvet box on her kitchen counter, and now they felt like ticking time bombs. Foster Capital Group. Of course. The name hadn't clicked until she'd seen it in gold, etched into the glass like a crown. Atlas Foster wasn't some charming good Samaritan with a toolbox in his trunk. He was the Atlas Foster financial mogul, media-shy millionaire, and apparently a man who didn't think she needed to know that. She didn't call him. She didn't go to the coffee shop where they usually met. She didn't answer her door when he knocked the following evening, standing there with 2 coffees in hand as if nothing had changed. She just watched silently through the peephole, heart pounding, breath shallow. On the 3rd day, he was waiting outside the bakery when she arrived for her shift. "You've been avoiding me," he said, stepping away from the wall, hands in the pockets of his camel coat. Lena's voice was low, brittle. "You think. I get it. You're upset. You lied to me." "I didn't lie," he said calmly. "I didn't tell you everything. There's a difference." She crossed her arms tightly, hugging her cardigan around herself like armor. "A difference that conveniently benefits you." His jaw tightened. "Can we talk? Somewhere private. I'm not going anywhere with you until you explain why you pretended to be someone you're not." "I never pretended. I just didn't lead with a net worth. You made me feel stupid." "I didn't mean to." She exhaled sharply and looked away, blinking hard. The street was quiet, the morning traffic still a few blocks off. "You knew from the start I had no idea who you were." "Yes. And you liked that." "I did," he said, no hesitation. "Because you talked to me like I was a person. Not a name. Not a headline. Not a bank account. Just me." She looked at him, then really looked at the faint shadows under his eyes, the way his shoulders seemed heavier than usual. He didn't look like a man who'd won something. He looked like one who might be about to lose it. "I need to get inside," she said. "I have work. I'll wait." "I don't want you to." He didn't argue. He just nodded once and stepped back. The day dragged. Orders were slow, the register was glitching, and the espresso machine sputtered like it had a grudge. But mostly, it was Lena's thoughts that made everything feel heavier. Every time she glanced at the door, she half expected to see him there. She told herself she wouldn't care if he was. She told herself she wouldn't care if he wasn't. But when she finally stepped out close to sunset, he was gone. Her chest ached in a way she hadn't expected. That night, she opened her laptop and typed his name into the search bar. The results exploded across the screen. Photos of him at charity galas, finance expos, and luxury retreats. Always in tailored suits. Always surrounded by people. Always looking like the world bent slightly at the edges to make room for him. She found an interview rare, apparently where he spoke about rebuilding his firm after a hostile takeover attempt. He looked calm, composed, and devastatingly confident. Not the man who had scraped paint off her car window with a length of wire. She barely slept. The next morning, her phone vibrated while she was weighing flour for a custom cake order. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Lena, it's me." She didn't respond. "I'm not calling to justify anything. I just want to tell you something. And then you don't have to talk to me again if you don't want to." She waited. "I didn't tell you because the second people find out who I am, everything shifts. I stop being a man and start being a transaction. I liked you too much to risk that. You could have trusted me," she said quietly. "I didn't trust myself," he admitted. "I thought if I told you I'd lose what we had before I even got to see if it was real. And now, I think I already did." She hung up without saying goodbye. 3 days later, a delivery arrived at the bakery. A wooden crate, sealed and heavy. No card. No name. Inside was a hand-carved cake stand, the kind bakers dream of. Solid walnut with her initials burned into the base in delicate script. Beneath it was a folded note. "I saw it in Paris last year and thought the shop owner was insane for selling it. I bought it anyway. I didn't know who I was saving it for then. Now I do." She stared at it for a long time. That evening, she found herself outside a tall building with a glass facade, watching faceless silhouettes move behind the many windows. She wasn't sure what she was doing there. The doorman raised an eyebrow as she approached. "Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Atlas Foster." "Do you have an appointment?" "No. But tell him Lena Everett's downstairs. If he doesn't want to see me, I'll leave." He picked up the phone, murmured something, then nodded. "Penthouse. The elevator's unlocked." The ride up made her stomach twist. When the doors opened, she stepped into a space that looked like it belonged on the cover of an architectural magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A fireplace framed in marble. A grand piano she didn't know he played. He stood near the balcony, shirt sleeves rolled, drink in hand, watching the skyline. "I didn't think you'd come. I didn't think I would either." He set the glass down and crossed the room slowly. "You don't owe me anything. I didn't come here to settle a debt." "Then why?" "Because I'm still angry, but I'm also still thinking about you. And that's infuriating." He gave a short breath of a laugh. "I've never wanted to be anyone else until I met you." "I don't want you to be someone else," she said. "I want you to be honest." "I can do that." She looked around. "This place is a lot." "It's quiet here," he said. "That's why I like it." "And the cake stand?" "I wasn't trying to buy forgiveness. I just wanted you to have something beautiful that lasts." She nodded slowly. "You're good at this. Making people feel things. I only ever wanted to make you feel safe. I don't need saving." "I know." She ran a hand through her hair. "This doesn't change how complicated it is. I'm not asking you to ignore the complications. I'm asking you to let me try again with the truth this time." She studied him. The careful stillness. The quiet hope in his eyes. The truth was she missed him. Not the millionaire. The man who made her laugh when she was exhausted. The man who listened with his whole attention. The man who had kissed her like she mattered. "Okay," she said finally. His brow lifted. "Okay. One coffee. One conversation. No gifts. No surprises. Just you. Just me." He nodded slowly. "I'll take it." She stepped toward the elevator but paused before pressing the button. "Atlas?" "Yeah? If you ever lie to me again, we're done." "I won't." She left without looking back, but her pulse was racing all the way down. The next day, he met her at a small cafe on the edge of the park. Nothing fancy. Just 2 cups of coffee and a table in the shade. This time, he told her everything. About the company he built from the ground up. About the people who tried to take it. About the father who'd walked out and the mother who'd worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table. About the fear that no one saw him anymore, just the empire. She listened. And when he was done, she told him about her own fears. About not being enough. About always being the girl who couldn't quite keep up. About how part of her still didn't believe he could really want her, not when he could have anyone. He reached across the table and took her hand. "I don't want anyone else." She didn't pull away. "Then stop trying to impress me." He smiled gently. "I'd rather just be with you." It wasn't a perfect fix, but it was a beginning. And for the first time in days, Lena didn't feel like she was free falling. She felt like maybe, just maybe, they were both finally standing on solid ground. 2 weeks passed, and with each day, Lena felt the ground shift beneath her. Not in the way it had when she'd discovered Atlas's wealth, but in the quieter, more unnerving way that came when emotions deepened without your permission. She hadn't planned on letting herself fall for him. She'd told herself she was only giving him a second chance to prove he could be honest. But now she couldn't ignore the way her pulse quickened when she saw his name on her schedule or how her fingers hovered over her phone at night, hoping he'd call. She hadn't told anyone about him. Not her coworkers, not her mother, not even Olivia, her best friend since high school. It wasn't because she was ashamed. It was because she wasn't sure how to explain it. How do you explain falling for a man who handed you your car keys one day and turned out to own half the skyline the next? But keeping it to herself only made the feelings grow more tangled. On a rainy afternoon, Atlas sent a car to pick her up after her shift. She tried to decline. She wasn't helpless. And she hated feeling like one of those women who got swept up in someone else's world, but the bakery's parking lot had flooded and the wind was brutal. She climbed into the back of the Mercedes reluctantly, cheeks flushed as the driver greeted her by name. When she reached the address he'd sent, she expected another high-rise or glossy restaurant. Instead, the car pulled up outside a long, single-story building tucked behind a row of trees. The sign above the door was faded, Foster Youth Outreach Center. She stepped inside and froze. There was no luxury here, just scuffed floors, mismatched chairs, and the unmistakable scent of old books and cafeteria pizza. But the space buzzed with warmth. A handful of teenagers clustered around a table covered in art supplies. An older woman with silver braids handed out snacks. And in the corner, seated at a scratched-up desk, was Atlas. He looked up when he saw her, smiling faintly. "You made it." She blinked. "What is this place?" "It's where I go when I need to remember who I actually am." He stood, brushing chalk dust from his hands. His sleeves were rolled, his tie gone. It was the most unguarded she'd seen him since the day they met. "I started this place 5 years ago," he said. "After the company stabilized. I wanted something that wasn't about profit margins." She walked slowly through the room, eyes scanning the walls. Drawings, photos, poems all pinned with thumbtacks and curling at the edges. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want it to be another thing that made me look good. I needed you to see it for what it is." "And what is it?" "A second chance. For them. For me. For anyone who needs it." A girl passed by them, maybe 14, with purple braids and a sketchpad clutched to her chest. She gave Atlas a quick fist bump before disappearing into a side room. "You know all their names?" Lena asked quietly. "Every single one." She looked at him, heart thudding. "You're not what I expected." He met her gaze. "Neither are you." They stayed for an hour. He didn't hover. He didn't try to impress her. He just introduced her to the volunteers, handed out supplies, cleaned up a spill. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Lena realized she wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop anymore. She was just there, present, and more herself than she'd felt in weeks. Later, they stepped out into the rain. He held the door for her, but didn't offer an umbrella. She didn't mind. "You didn't bring me here to impress me," she said, pulling her coat tighter. "No. I brought you here because I want you to know the parts of me that don't come with a price tag. You could have just told me." "I could have," he admitted, "but I thought it might mean more if you saw it yourself." They stood in silence for a moment, the rain soft against the pavement. "I'm scared," she said suddenly. He looked at her. "Of what?" "Of losing myself in this. In you." "You won't." His voice was steady. "I won't let you. Don't make promises you can't keep." "I'm not." She studied him for a long beat. Then, with her heart hammering, she reached for his hand. He took it without hesitation, his fingers wrapping around hers like they belonged there. The next week flew by. They didn't fall into a routine. He was still constantly pulled into meetings and late-night calls, and she was knee-deep in custom orders for wedding season, but they carved out time. He picked her up after work and brought her to little hole-in-the-wall diners he swore had the best food in the city. She dragged him to a thrift store where she hunted for vintage cake stands and made him try on a hideous neon windbreaker just to make him laugh. They talked about everything. About the summer she'd almost gone to pastry school in Paris but backed out because her mother got sick. About his habit of collecting first edition books, even though he rarely had time to read them. About the time she fell off a stage during a third-grade play and still couldn't look at red curtains without cringing. She found herself leaning in, letting go. Until the night she met his mother. It wasn't planned. They were supposed to meet for dinner at a quiet French place in Midtown. She arrived early, nervous but excited. He texted that he was running late but would meet her there. When she walked in, the hostess led her to a private table in the back. And there, already seated, was a woman in a navy cashmere coat with a diamond brooch and sharp, assessing eyes. "You must be Lena," she said smoothly, extending a hand. "I'm Margaret Foster, Atlas's mother." Lena froze for a split second before shaking her hand. "He didn't mention you'd be joining us." "I didn't mention it to him either." Lena sat, choosing her words carefully. "It's nice to meet you. I've heard a great deal about you." Margaret's tone was polite, but there was an unmistakable undercurrent. "Cool. Controlled. Curious. Hopefully good things. That remains to be seen." Lena blinked. "Excuse me." Margaret folded her hands on the table. "You seem lovely, but I've seen many women drift through my son's life. They come for the charm, for the shine, and when it fades, they leave. I'm not here for the shine. That's what they all say." Lena took a slow breath. "I didn't know who he was when we met. I found out by accident. I stayed anyway." Margaret tilted her head slightly. "Interesting. I care about him. Not his money. Not his name. Him. The man who volunteers at a youth center and eats street tacos at midnight." A flicker passed across the woman's face. Surprise, maybe, or something close to it. Before she could respond, Atlas arrived. His expression shifted the moment he saw them. "What's going on?" "Just a brief introduction," Margaret said, rising to kiss his cheek. "I'll leave you two to your evening." She left without another word. Atlas turned to Lena, visibly tense. "She wasn't supposed to be here, I gathered. I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize for her." He reached for her hand, voice low. "I should have warned you. She's protective. And not always kind. I can handle her." He looked at her, eyes searching. "You sure?" "I didn't walk into this blind, Atlas. I knew it wouldn't be simple." "You still want to be here?" She squeezed his hand. "Yes." That night, after they finished dinner, he walked her home. The streets were quiet, the air biting with late spring chill. Outside her building, he stopped. "I know I'm not easy. I've got baggage, expectations, a family that doesn't always make things better." "I've got baggage too," she said. "And a car that still sometimes won't start." He laughed softly. "You're not scared anymore?" "I'm still scared," she admitted. "But maybe being scared and doing it anyway is the point." He leaned in, his voice just above a whisper. "I don't want to lose this. You. Us. You're not going to." He kissed her then, slow and certain, and she kissed him back, letting herself believe, for the first time, that maybe this wasn't just a chance encounter or a fling built on coincidence. Maybe this was the beginning of something real. And maybe, just maybe, she was ready for it. Lena stood in the center of her apartment, staring at the chaos around her. There were cake sketches spread across the coffee table, a half-unpacked box of baking molds on the floor, and a roll of parchment paper precariously balanced on the back of her couch. She wasn't sure when her modest one-bedroom had turned into a full-fledged cake studio, but it was happening fast. She rubbed a spot of powdered sugar off her cheek and dropped onto the couch, exhausted but buzzing. A week ago, Atlas had handed her a folded sheet of paper in the middle of the park under a canopy of rustling branches. It had been a lease agreement, 3 months rent-free for a commercial kitchen space in a trendy part of the city. "I know you said you wanted to do this on your own," he'd said then. "But this isn't about charity. It's about giving someone I believe in the room to grow." She hadn't answered him right away. She'd stared at the paper, heart-thudding, and said, "I'm going to spend every second thinking I have to earn this." He had only nodded. Then earn it. And she had. She'd spent the last 7 days baking, planning, and designing her first official small-batch custom cake menu. Everything was happening faster than she'd expected, but the oddest part was how much it didn't scare her anymore. There was a knock at the door. She opened it to find Atlas leaning against the frame, holding a brown paper bag that smelled like cinnamon and butter. "Emergency pastries," he said. "You sounded like you were about to pass out over the phone." "I said I was tired," she replied, stepping aside to let him in. "You said if I stop moving, I may never get up again, which is code for, please bring me sustenance or I will perish." She laughed as he placed the bag on the kitchen counter and started unpacking it. Croissants, almond danishes, and 2 steaming cups of chamomile tea. I didn't even realize I was hungry, she said, taking a bite of the croissant. Classic Lena, he said, pulling out a chair and sitting across from her. Forget to take care of yourself when you're too focused on everyone else. She paused mid-bite. You know, you're getting a little too good at reading me. I've had practice. There was something in his tone that made her look up. He was watching her, not just admiring her, but studying her, like he was memorizing the moment. Spill it, she said, setting her pastry down. You've got that look again. What look? The one where you're trying to figure out how to tell me something without scaring me off. He leaned back slightly, eyes still locked on hers. I've been invited to the Whitmore Gala next Friday. She blinked. That's the big one, right? The benefit for the New Hope Foundation. He nodded. Black tie. Press everywhere. It's a whole thing. And you're telling me this because I want you to come with me. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Atlas, that's... I know, he cut in. It's a lot, but it's important to me. Not because of the event, but because I want you there. With me. Publicly. No more hiding or waiting or easing into this. She looked down at her hands. That's a big leap. It is, he agreed. But I'm not asking you to be anyone other than who you are. I'm asking because I want the world to see the woman I'm falling in love with. Her breath caught. He didn't flinch or soften or backtrack. He just watched her, steady and open. You're falling in love with me? She asked quietly. I'm already there, he said. But I figured it's polite to give you a heads up. She stood slowly, walked around the table, and sat on his lap, her arms wrapping around his neck. That's one hell of a heads up, she whispered. His hand slid to her waist. So, the gala? She rested her forehead against his. I'll go. But only if you promise not to let me trip in front of 300 people. I'll hold your hand the entire night if I have to. Deal? The night of the gala arrived faster than she expected. A stylist showed up at her door, one of Atlas's doing, of course, and transformed her into someone who looked like she belonged on a magazine cover. Her dress was deep navy with clean lines and an open back. Her hair was swept up and her makeup was soft and elegant. She barely recognized herself. When Atlas picked her up, he didn't speak right away. He just looked at her for a long moment before offering his arm. I don't have words, he said finally. Good, she replied, linking her arm through his. Because I'm nervous enough for both of us. You don't need to be. The venue was lit like a dream. Crystal chandeliers, gold-trimmed walls, and waiters in tuxedos carrying silver trays. Photographers hovered near the entrance and Lena's heart pounded as flashes went off around them. Atlas didn't let go of her hand. Not once. Inside, people turned to look. She heard whispers, saw glances. But Atlas introduced her to everyone. Not as his date. Not as someone he was seeing. He introduced her as Lena Everett, the owner of her own boutique cake business, and the woman who had changed his life. By the time dinner was served, she'd stopped hearing the whispers. By the time the auction began, she'd stopped noticing the cameras. And when the music started, Atlas pulled her onto the dance floor and held her like there was no one else in the room. This feels surreal, she murmured against his shoulder. He leaned down, lips close to her ear. This is real. Everything else fades. But this what we're building, that's solid. They danced until her feet hurt. And when they finally left, he didn't take her back to her apartment. He brought her to a rooftop. The skyline stretched out in every direction, glittering and endless. A small table had been set with a single candle, a bottle of wine, and 2 plates of food that had clearly been smuggled out of the gala. You planned this? She asked, stunned. I wanted to end the night somewhere quiet, he said, pulling out her chair. They sat, clinked glasses, and watched the city breathe around them. I've never felt like this before, she said, voice soft. I have, he replied. She looked at him. Every time I'm with you. A long silence passed, filled only by the hum of the city below. Then, carefully, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath hitched. Atlas? I'm not asking you to marry me tonight, he said gently. But I am asking you to let me love you. Fully. Publicly. Without reservation. And when you're ready, I want to build a life with you. He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, and timeless. A single round diamond on a gold band. She stared at it, then at him. You told me once that you were afraid of losing yourself, he said. But you've done the opposite. You found more of yourself and brought me along with you. Tears burned at the corners of her eyes. I love you, he said. And I want to spend the rest of my life proving it. She didn't speak. She just reached out and took the ring. Then, without a word, she slipped it onto her finger. He exhaled, relief washing over his face, and stood to pull her into his arms. "You didn't say anything," he murmured into her hair. "I didn't have to," she said. "You already knew." They stood like that for a long time, the city spinning beneath them, their futures unfolding like constellations overhead. And when he kissed her, slow and deep, she knew with absolute certainty that getting locked out of her car had been the best mistake of her life. The bakery was closed, but Lena stood in the center of its newly renovated kitchen, staring at the gleaming counters like she couldn't believe they were hers. Her name, Lena Everett, was etched in gold script on the frosted glass door that led to the front. A week ago, the final permits had come through. 2 nights ago, the custom oven had been installed. And now, standing beneath the soft hum of the lights, she could feel it. Her dream was no longer a distant wish. It was real, tangible, built with her hands, her vision. And yes, a little help from Atlas. But it was hers. The door creaked open behind her. "I knocked," Atlas said, stepping inside. "You didn't hear me." She turned. "I was having a moment." He paused by the prep table, taking in her flour-dusted apron and the loose tendrils of hair that had escaped her bun. "Looks like a good one. I just needed to see it again. Empty. Quiet. Before all the noise starts." He walked toward her, slow and steady. "You ready for that noise?" "I think I am." He leaned against the counter beside her. "I brought something." She raised an eyebrow. "If it's another antique cake stand, I have officially run out of shelf space." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a slim leather-bound notebook. "What is that?" "It's yours." "Well, it was mine. But now I want you to have it." She took it carefully, flipping open the cover. Inside were pages filled with neat, slanted handwriting. Notes, ideas, sketches, business concepts, financial projections. All in Atlas's hand. "I started it years ago," he said, "when I was trying to figure out how to build something from nothing. I thought maybe it would help you now." She ran her fingers over the pages, heartful. "You kept all this?" "I never showed it to anyone. Until now." She glanced up, eyes soft. "You trust me that much?" "I trust you with everything, Lena." She closed the notebook and pressed it to her chest. "Thank you for this, for believing in me before I fully believed in myself. I didn't do anything you weren't already doing. I just saw it." She stepped closer. "I want you to be part of this. Not just as the guy who opened a kitchen space or brought me pastries when I forgot to eat, but as someone who's in this with me. All the way." "I'm already there," he said, voice low. "You're sure?" "I've never been more certain of anything." They stood in silence, the kind that didn't need filling. Then Lena reached out and pulled him into a kiss, slow, intentional, and completely unhurried. When they pulled back, her hands stayed wrapped around his. "I was thinking," she said, "maybe the soft opening shouldn't be just about the bakery." He tilted his head. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if we invited your mother?" He blinked. "You want to invite Margaret?" "I think it's time." She didn't exactly give me a warm welcome, but I'm not someone who walks away from challenges. Besides, if we're going to do this, really do it, I want us to be able to stand together. No more half measures. He studied her face, then slowly nodded. "All right, I'll talk to her. And I want to invite my mom too. She's finally feeling strong enough to travel, and she's dying to see the kitchen." "I'd love that." Lena smiled. "It'll be the first time both sides of our lives are in the same room. Then let's make it count." The soft opening arrived 5 days later. It wasn't a huge event, just close friends, a few supporters, and people who had helped along the way. Lena stood behind the counter in a soft cream dress, her hair twisted into a loose braid, watching as people admired the space she'd poured her soul into. Her mother sat near the window, a cup of tea in hand, beaming. Across the room, Atlas stood beside Margaret, who wore a navy sheath dress and a reserved expression. But she was there. And when Lena approached to offer her a sample of her signature lemon lavender cake, Margaret accepted it with a quiet nod. "Your presentation is impressive," she said. "Thank you. I hope the flavor matches." She took a bite, chewed, swallowed. Then, "It does." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't effusive. But it was something. Later, as the crowd thinned and the lights dimmed, Atlas found Lena in the kitchen, wiping down counters. "You did it," he said. "We did it," she corrected. He stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "There's something I've been meaning to ask." She turned in his embrace. He reached into his blazer pocket and pulled out a small white envelope. "This came in yesterday." She took it, curious. Inside was a folded piece of paper. An invitation to a culinary competition. National. Televised. Sponsored by one of the biggest food networks in the country. She gaped. "How did they?" "Someone submitted your work. Your cakes. Your business plan." She narrowed her eyes. "You?" "I may have emailed a few contacts." She shook her head, laughing. "Atlas. I didn't do it to push you. I just figured the world should see what I see." Her eyes scanned the letter again. "This is huge." "I know." She looked up at him. "You really think I could win something like this?" "I think you could leave every judge speechless." The next morning, Lena sat on the bench in front of the bakery, the invitation still tucked in her bag. Atlas sat beside her, sipping coffee from a paper cup. "I've never been on camera before," she said. "You've never had to be. But you will be amazing." "I'm scared." "I'll be there." She leaned against his shoulder. "Then I'm in." He kissed the top of her head. "Good." 3 weeks later, she stood on a competition stage, hands steady as she piped delicate floral details onto a 4-tier wedding cake. Cameras whirred around her. Judges murmured in the background. But all she could see was Atlas, standing just off stage, watching her like she was the only person in the room. She made it to the finals. She didn't win first place, but she walked out with a standing ovation, a new waitlist for her business, and an offer to publish a cookbook. And none of it would have mattered half as much without him. Months passed. The bakery flourished. Her mother stayed in the city longer than expected, helping with morning prep and chatting up customers with pride. Atlas's firm continued to grow, but he made time for her always. They took late-night walks, shared weekend breakfasts on her rooftop, and slowly their lives wove together like threads in a tapestry. One evening they returned home from a dinner with friends. Lena kicked off her shoes, curled up on the couch, and reached for a blanket. Atlas joined her, tucking her legs over his lap. "You know," she said, toying with the hem of his sleeve, "I never expected any of this." "Me either. I thought love would feel like fireworks. Like chaos. And? It's not. It's steadier. Quieter. But deeper. Like gravity." He brushed a kiss across her temple. "You're everything I didn't know I needed." She smiled. "I love you. I love you more." They sat there as the city lights flickered beyond the windows, wrapped in warmth, in safety, in each other. Outside, the world kept turning. But inside, in their quiet corner of it, everything was exactly as it should be. They had found their place. Together. Forever.